Good evening, everyone. Good evening, and welcome to this special edition champion conversation about navigating the nuances of the holiday season. I'm your host, Napoleon Bradford, and it is without a doubt an honor to be here and to share this space. I want to give you space, those who are watching, to take a minute, share this, as well as type in the chat and comments where you're watching from. Now, we are fully embedded in the comments, so your questions and your conversations can be easily responded to if you just type in the chat. I apologize for the delay, but as you know, things never go the way you plan. So, with that being said, this conversation is so important, especially as we're preparing really 3 days away from Thanksgiving. And for many of us, we have experienced some things in the last 365 days that may make this year different. And even if it's not in the last 365 days, the reality is oftentimes the holidays are filled with moments that trigger past trauma or that just seem different. Many of us aren't as enthusiastic. We're not excited about decking the halls with boughs of holly. We're not excited about here comes Santa Claus or any of those things. So I have to be honest that even for me, yesterday, right? In fact, no, it was Saturday, I finally finished Young Sheldon, right? It's a series spinoff of Big Bang Theory. And nobody warned me about the last season. And I'm not going to spoil it, but in the last season, 3 episodes before the end, there's a traumatic event. And the way the traumatic event unfolded was two coaches from the father's school showed up, the coach and the principal, to deliver bad news. And for those that don't know my story, I was at church on a Saturday, and 2 police officers came to tell me that my daughter had been killed in an accident. And so when I saw it, and then the subsequent episode was all about Sheldon reliving the last encounter with different outcomes, different things he should have said, different things he should have done. And I remember grappling the same way, trying to figure out how I could have done things differently so that my daughter would still be here. And so for the last 3 episodes of Young Sheldon, I cried, and it put me in a dark place for about 24 hours. I couldn't finish my work. I couldn't write my sermon. I was devastatingly impacted. And my daughter passed away in the car accident in 2016. So 8 years later, I'm having a major grief event. And so I know it's not just me, which is why I thought this was so necessary to have. And I couldn't have this conversation without one of my closest friends and someone who navigates grief better than anyone else I know. So without further ado, I bring to the stage my beloved sister, Dr. Jamie Eaddy Chism.
Of course, I'm on mute. Hey there, my brother. So glad
Hey,
to be here tonight.
yeah,
And listen
glad
to
to
your
have you here.
story, man. Listening to the story, even as we start the conversation. Yeah, thank you for sharing that as an opening for us. Yeah.
Yeah, it seems so apropos, right? Like we're having this, and this happens to me. I'm supposed to be hosting it, but in the preparation for hosting it, this
Yeah.
this event happens. And so let's unpack the reality of
Mhm.
emotions that many of us don't expect to have during the holidays, but that might creep up on us.
Yeah. We're doing this at work right now. This idea of, or talking with people at work about this idea around, we don't get to determine what emotion is going to show up in our bodies, in our being, right? That it has free reign. It can come and go. And often during these holiday seasons, whether the loss we experienced was last year or maybe even 10 years ago, it doesn't mean that sadness won't rear their face. Like 10 years ago, you've been fine for the last 9 years. And all of a sudden, this year, sadness shows up. Anger or frustration can show up. Joy, right, can show up as we think about the moments that we got to spend with people. But yeah, these are memories. And I don't really like to use the word triggered because I do a lot of work in gun violence, right? So that is not the word we want to use. But these emotions that are awakened, especially during the holiday season, songs are playing, commercials are playing, everywhere you go, there are decorations. And so any of those places that we find ourselves can be the activator for memory. That memory then awakens emotions, right? So yeah, and it's all of them. And really to help us feel that we don't have to be ashamed that, you know, this loss was 20 years ago. I shouldn't be feeling this way. No, it came, give it its space, right? And so yeah, any emotion can show up in this season and it can be activated because everything around us is celebrating a holiday. Even if we don't celebrate the holiday, the memory that it awakens in us can certainly bring emotion with it. Yeah.
That's a major point. And I love the word activate or awaken, right? I love it because it suggests it may have been dormant or under control for a while, but some new stimuli, some new memory, some new occurrence shook it a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. Because it lets us know that all of the emotion is here. It's here, right? And yeah, maybe I haven't been sad for a year, and that's okay. That doesn't mean that sadness, that I will no longer feel sad, that I will never feel sad again because of this particular loss. It's just that I'm not sad right now. But you play, you know, for some folks, soon as you hit in my mind, for those who celebrate the Christmas season, right, it starts to bring up memories of people and things, and that could be some sadness, some joy, some peace, but also some sadness. So yeah, it activates memory. We have memory. Now there can be some cognitive deficiencies where memory doesn't work the same way it did before. Okay. But barring that, we have memory. And memory is that thing that reminds us of the good times, of the not so good times. It reminds us of the connection. It reminds us of the closeness, right? It reminds us of the, I can reach out and touch you. It reminds us. And so, yeah, just feeling comfortable enough to know that even if you don't feel the thing today, it doesn't mean that you're not capable of feeling it and being okay with the feelings that arise.
Now, why do you say that? And while you're saying that, this is what came to mind. Because the other piece is this illusion that grief sometimes somehow dies, or you can be cured from grief, right? But again, those words activate and awaken both suggest that grief is forever. It's a forever part that we can either choose to ignore and it sneaks up on us, or we can choose to embrace and we learn to coexist. Is that right? Or should I not use that term?
No. So yeah, grief is not something that dies, in that we are forever living the rest of our lives knowing that we've experienced this loss. And so the reminder, the memory of the loss is there. So the possibility for me to be activated, or, you know, maybe I'm not in an acute stage of grief, but the possibility of just having to navigate the emotion around loss is always present. It may not be acute today. It may be that it was 20 years ago, and you've you've reoriented yourself to life. You have reimagined what life can be. You have, identified who you are today, minus the people who aren't with you physically anymore. You've done all of that work, but that does not negate the fact that there was a pre and a post date, right? That there was a date that the person was here, and there was a date that you remember that you will no longer sort of see them physically. And so in that way, grief is this ongoing way that we navigate grief for the rest of our lives. It does not mean that it is overwhelming or that we are sad all the time. It just means the fact that we've encountered this loss, the possibility for all the emotions that are associated with, they can come, they can awaken, they can be present in our lives, in our bodies even. So just knowing, when you have a loss, you live the rest of your life with that loss. You live the rest of your life with that loss, and not every loss is as intense as, right, that there are levels, because it's personal. It's a personal experience. So there are levels to the loss, and there might be some losses that, for example, working with a family who the father transitioned a few years ago, father patriarch. Now the daughter is getting married, or she's married now, but was getting married, and dad died a few years ago. They found life again, living, but now she's getting married, and guess what happened? What is one of our sort of rituals in this marriage ritual? What are one of the practices in the marriage ritual? The father walks her down the aisle, one of the parents, right? Or a loved one, at least, right? A dear, cherished loved one. And because her father was alive before she knew him, she had always imagined dad walking her down the aisle. Well, dad's not here. So it wasn't that she had been sad about dad over the last year or so, but when she started planning that wedding, the reminder that, oh, wait a minute, here is an event in my life that my dad is not going to be here for. Right? And so we have events. Maybe she graduates school. Maybe she has her first child. The reminder, dad is not here. And so as we live, that's where how grief continues to stay with us. It is that we continue to have these events in our lives and moments in our lives when we are reminded that someone who was cherished, someone who was loved, someone with whom we had connection, because sometimes maybe the love ain't so great, but someone with whom we had connection is no longer here. And so, that's how it lives forever, which is not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing.
So in this continuous grief cycle, I think we also should give room that it's not always physical loss, right?
Yes.
It's not always a person, right? The holiday can be a good reminder of how life has changed in general.
Yes.
Job, financial status, health, location.
Yeah.
All of these changes may not manifest themselves in the day-to-day, but it could be as simple as every year you get a gingerbread cake from a particular store. Now you've moved.
Yep.
Every year your Christmas bonus has helped you provide extra gifts. You're no longer working there.
Yeah.
So again, how do you suggest we first come to terms with the loss, celebrate the memory of, but also make decisions to move beyond?
Yeah. So first, let's go to the way you were describing grief for us, right? So I always share grief is our natural response to loss, change, and transition, including death, right? And including death, because non-death related losses, as you named, are really important. And I just need to say, we don't make enough space for people experiencing non-death related losses, right? We don't make enough space for people, and we don't make enough space for ourselves. And so you naming that maybe last year you were employed, and this year the holiday season has come up, and you've had to take a job where you make less money, where you've moved locations, and there are these markers. So the store that makes the gingerbread cake or cookies that you can't get to. That then awakens grief in us. We are reminded. So how do we do this, right? So because folks are like, listen, I'm grieving, and most of the time we just wanted to go away. Let's be clear, we just wanted to go away. And the not so good news is that's not how it works, right? It is. I believe that by naturalizing or normalizing, by helping us make common that this is a human experience, right? That as we do that, then we open up space for the full expression of it. That it doesn't have to be something that I get over as if it's a cold, right? That I'm not trying to cure myself of grief, because I am not sick. I am not ill. Grief is not an illness. Grief is, for me, I use my spirituality, right? So grief is the Creator's invitation to us to reimagine, to continuously reimagine ourselves, right? To continuously reorient ourselves so that we can find our place in the world today. That grief in that way is this gift. Now, listen, I get it. Ain't nobody trying to lose nothing and nobody. I get it. Me too. But in the loss, grief invites us. Grief says, guess what? I know this, that, they are gone. While you are still here, let's work on how we reshape you for the way your life is shaped today. Let's work on remaking you for the life you have today. And that's the gift of grief. So what does that mean? Getting over it? No, I say you ain't got to rush to get over it. Give yourself space to allow you, and again, for me, my spirituality, right? You and your Creator, you and higher power, you and the universe, whatever language makes sense for you, right? Allow yourself to recalibrate, to sort of be remolded for today, because Dr. Napoleon, if grief did not invite us to reorient and to reshape and to reimagine ourselves, we would not be here. We would, in fact, die when those that we love die. We would not be able to move forward. Part of moving forward is the fact that we have the capacity, that we have the energy to remake ourselves for today. Right? So I don't know if I answered your question, but I hope somebody heard me. Grief is, again, I'm not wishing loss on anybody. Let me tell you, I have been where I felt stuck in loss. I have been not wanting to engage people. I have been the fake smile so I can go out and do the work I got to do and then run back home because I really don't want to do anything. I have been there. And I am saying, one, get some support, right? So there's an article in one of the journals I was looking at in the hospital, and with the violence, the gun violence related work that I do today, and it talks about one of the single most important factor in someone navigating grief is whether or not they have adequate support. And support, right? That could be your personal therapist, that could be your care team, that could be your pastor, that might be a friend, that might, right? Community, it's healing circles. What is the support we have? So I tell folks, you ain't got to rush to get over it, because what is getting over it? But you can have support that can journey with you through it, and that can be there as you start to reorient and reshape and reimagine yourself for today, because you're in today, right? And as we do that, you know what begins to happen over time? And I say over time is you might actually start to believe in a tomorrow too.
Wow. I want to sit with this for a second.
Yes.
Because this in itself is not an easy task.
It's not.
Right? To see grief as an invitation, right? That the creator, based on your faith tradition or some higher being, or that the world itself invites you, first of all, to live beyond the moment.
To keep
Because
going. The
because
world invites you to keep, yep.
because what a lot of people say in grief is, I don't know how I can continue to live.
Right.
When you were clear in what you said as part of your position and your opinion, that if there is no hope for beyond or after, then we would be part of the reason there is grief. In other words, we would be dead. But because the moment did not take us, that we were a part of the after and the beyond, then we have to reshape how we see it and how we see us and our life.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the invitation.
That's the invitation. So it's a choice. It's a choice.
And so this is what makes it hard, right? It is a choice. And again, none of this is easy. It is not. It's a choice. And some days the choice is to disengage, and that's healthy. Some days the choice is to disengage and to stay on the sofa, wrapped up in your knitted blanket, your weighted blanket, watching binge. Like, some days that's the choice. And that's a healthy choice some days. That's the healthy choice. But we don't get to we must engage grief, though. We must and again, here's the thing. It's not that I don't think the world is inviting us to loss, right? I don't think that the law, but guess what? There is a certain kind of impermanence in moving through this world, right? And so it's starting to, for me, one day I had to start thinking differently. I had to start thinking about the fact that what lasts forever in this place? Certainly not this body I'm in. It doesn't last forever. Certainly not even one's mobility, one's sight, one's intellect. Like, what lasts forever? Your energy, maybe your essence, right? Even after you're gone. But that just means that even the job you have, you won't always have that job. The relationship you're in, and this is not wishing divorce on people or anything like that. This is saying that it shifts. Because again, remember, grief is our response to loss, change, and transition. The relationship doesn't have to end, but it might shift. Why might it shift? Because you are growing, you are changing. And so you're both shifting and transitioning together. That things change. And so if we enter into, have this understanding of change as a natural part of our life cycle, that means that there will always be these events like the death of a loved one, or an event like the end of a relationship, or an event like a job loss, or an event like a change in my health, right? There will be events that I encounter that are experienced as losses, changes, transitions. And I have to know somehow. And maybe some of this knowing comes because you've gone through some loss, right? Some of this knowing is not, we don't wake up just knowing. Some of this knowing is that you've gone through some loss. You've had some community around you, praying you through, helping you through with rituals and practices, sitting and listening, right? You've had some people accompanying you in loss. But it is, we must engage, right? We because we are different. And if the me that existed pre-loss doesn't make room for the me that is emerging post-loss, then I might get stuck somewhere. Because this new me is here. She's here. She's here because your world has changed. And that's the piece. It is, am I willing to allow myself to continuously be reimagined, reshaped again for my today, and ideally for my tomorrow.
Man. So engaging the grief or ignoring the grief does not remove the loss. The loss has occurred. The loss has occurred. You can either, and and even we subtly accept it without knowing it, right? I think about the fact, and this just came to me because last week, 2 weeks ago, we went and visited Noel's grave, right? We understand that the accident happened exit 137 in Rocky Mount, North Carolina. We know that though her body was transported from Nash Community Hospital to Sumter, to Joe's mortuary, we understand that even though the loss occurred, we know that her body may be buried in Evergreen, but she's not there, right? So we understand that. But you think about the unwillingness to change. People who lose their spouse in the hospital still show up to the graveyard every year to visit, knowing that there's been some change. Like even there has been some change. And I think that part of because you talked about the only thing that occurs is change. How do we, because even ignoring it does not take it away, right? We can ignore it, we can embrace it, engage it. But one of the key factors that you mentioned was then seeing ourselves as changed by it, but also changed because of it, and changed for a future beyond it.
Change for a future. So change for a future beyond it. That we are, even before people breathe their last breath, we are in a constant state of change together. Period. Right. And when we allow grief to be the catalyst for life, like when we allow ourselves to engage grief in such a way that it might become the catalyst for helping us now shape what life will be for ourselves and even those that we love, right? Grief might be the thing that draws us closer or deeper into our understanding of purpose. Remember, I'm not saying that I want you to experience loss. I am saying that when we experience loss, sometimes we begin to see life a bit differently, right? That again, I'm not asking loss to come into my life. And I know that it comes. And when it comes, what do I allow? How do I allow it to help me see myself, help me see humanity, help me see all of creation, help me see or experience the divine in a new way, in a more expansive way. I'll tell you this, it was loss that helped me just really have a bigger view of who God is. Right? That loss can be that catalyst. Loss can point us toward purpose. And so that's why when loss comes, it might take some time. It takes time. Why? Because guess what? How many years, how much attachment, how much connection existed here? How much of my identity was shaped by this relationship to a person, to a thing? How much of my routine, my daily routine, how much of my routine was connected to this person? And so they're not here, that means what? My whole world has been turned upside down. And this is the reimagining. The reimagining is I am daring to believe that although this person I was connected to and all of my routines that were somehow connected to them, that I can imagine at some point that I have the capacity to develop another routine that I can still live well, although differently, right? I can still experience hope and joy, although differently. And that is the other side of this, that's the invitation. And you said one more thing, and then I'm gonna turn it back over to you, because you talked about how sometimes we ignore the grief. We there are lots of things that we talk about. Masked grief, MASKED, right? And it's like a person is not outwardly showing or even acknowledging their grief. But one of the things that doctors will tell us is that those things begin to show up as physical symptoms or emotional, maybe outbursts, or emotional, right? Emotionally, perhaps even unhealthy behaviors. And physical symptoms might be headaches, fatigue, and some other things with no clear medical cause, right? So we might not admit or name grief for ourselves, but it doesn't mean that our being doesn't know that the loss has occurred and that there's something happening. So even if I don't say I'm grieving, that doesn't mean that my emotions, my body somatically, doesn't mean I'm not responding. I'm not admitting, but my body could be getting towed up because I'm grieving. And so it's not even just that we have to, yes, and acknowledging it is very important, because what might happen is, and this is true for so many communities, speaking specifically about African American communities, people of the African diaspora, but other communities that have been marginalized, is that some of the things that have caused us grief have been experienced for so long, and our responses to it have been passed down from generation to generation, that it starts to look like personality, culture, when really it's a response to grief. You see what I'm saying? And so we think, oh, this is just how I am. This is what it is. And if we trace it back some generations, we realize that this is a learned behavior against this particular type of, and I can use the word oppression, I can use the word violence, I can use the word loss. This is what we have. This is how we have adapted to continuous loss over time, right? Not engaging it, but developing these coping mechanisms that help us make it through, but it wears us out in the process.
Oh, so I want to go in 3 different directions.
Okay.
And I don't even know how we're going to do this. So the first thing I'm going to say is, in this reimagining, redefining, reorienting, what happens with the guilt that comes because you've decided, or you're attempting to try something new beyond the loss moment?
Yeah. So I'm glad you talk about guilt. So one, just for all of you who are watching, even if you watch it after the fact, everyone's not going to feel that guilt, right? So everybody's not going to feel the guilt, but some will. Because how dare I experience joy with my loved one gone, right? So one, education is really important in us moving through grief, which is why these kinds of conversations can help. It's how do we help folks recognize that you continuing to live is not a betrayal to the person who is no longer with us. So we got to sit with and dismantle the idea that to continue life is betrayal to the one who's not here. because I'm usually feeling guilty because I feel like how dare I laugh? Mom's not here. So how do conversations like this, how does having support, how does that work in helping us recognize that the guilt, and I can't erase your guilt. That's the thing about this too, right?
Mm-hmm.
It is, you have to, we can present information around permission, giving yourself permission to live, working on rituals that could maybe connect you. We call it continuing bonds, right? Mm-hmm. By staying connected to the legacy and the memory and the spirit of your loved one, and then continuing to live. But it's how do we think about what it means to live as non-betrayal, right? Like, I am not betraying the one who's not here. So that's something that we work with, and it takes time, but that's also something that a person has to do. Like, I can't give you the release from guilt, right? It is, I can present some things, talk through some things, and somewhere in there, you might even have to write letters to your loved one that's not here. Like, there are ways that we can just engage the feeling around guilt, and maybe it's connected to something else. So we can do that kind of exploration. So that's that whole guilt piece is, it is not a betrayal, that you are choosing to live, not just exist and be here, not just be a shell, not be, the Walking Dead, right? Where nothing about me is alive except I'm still breathing, right? Giving yourself permission to live requires, for some, exploring the guilt, finding out maybe what is this connected to, and then having some other language, some other, right? When that lie comes up, what kind of truth can I place against it? And I might have to do that continuously, right? This is why y'all see these things right here. I love these little things. They just stick to whatever surface. Like, in what way can I continuously give myself reminders? Because lies will pop up. Because I've been nursing these lies forever. They'll pop up. How do I give truth so that I can keep disrupting the lie that's popping up, that you can't smile and mom's not here? No, I can't. Like, what kind of truth can I use to disrupt the lie that I must remain in a state of despair because my loved one is not here?
A state of suspended animation.
Yeah.
But it's not just with loss of person, right? How can you go into the holiday and make new friends on your new job, yet still get invitations to your old parties from your old job, right? Are you betraying them? How can you, after having a financial difficulty that may have been witnessed by people, now go and buy gifts without people whispering and feeling guilty? You're feeling guilty about how, you just had your car repossessed. How are you out here buying Christmas gifts? Because if we're not careful, that same guilt can be attached to any transitional moment.
Yeah, absolutely. And that is, can we talk about what it means to allow people to rest in their humanity, which means all of the things you have named happen to us, right? And it is outside of us that someone has labeled that in a way that we hold shame and guilt with. Like, maybe I had $100 last week, and this week I only have $2. There's something outside of us that sort of demonizes or labels or shuns the fact that life is filled with transition. And so I must be able to acknowledge that. Dr. Bridgman says it this way. She says, instead of saying that there are some bumps in the road, right? Because then that means I'm walking through life and I might expect to see some bumps, right? A bump here, a little bit. She said, more, life is a bumpy road. Because
Mm.
so that, and those are two different sort of ideas. That if you say life is a bumpy road, then you might expect there's just going to be some bumps, rather than there are some bumps in the road. And so I think that piece, if we move, and I know we talk about bumpy roads and guilt, but it is, if I normalize that this is a human experience, then I also give people, we give ourselves, right, permission to not rest in shame or guilt when our situations change. When loss means that this year I can't buy, if you buy gifts, this year I can't buy gifts because of a loss I experienced. And instead of feeling some shame around that, I acknowledge that is where I am this year. Now, I wasn't there last year, because that's another thing that we do, right? We will take this year where I cannot do the things that maybe I want to do, and it will erase the last 25 years of showing up, of going to shelters and children's homes, and you've given millions of dollars, and this year you are on hard times. And so that's a human thing. We have to stop that. That's us. We gotta stop that. And if I might say, that is that sort of, when we think of white supremacy, that's that kind of ideology that pushes us into these boxes that no longer allow us to be human, right? We are human, and that means I'm going to grieve. I might feel a little bit of guilt, but I shouldn't be resting in the guilt and shame. We should be in community in a way that allows people to know that, yeah, you fell on some hard times, but I'm not going to leave you. If the holidays come up and you feel overwhelmed, guess what? You have permission to disengage this holiday, or to engage with all of your emotion. And we won't make space for both, right? We're not going to tell you that if you show up, then it must look like this in order to be in our holiday space too. So let you said you had three things. We only did.
Listen, you didn't added a fourth one, right?
Okay.
So you say that, and I love the way you differentiated between bumps in the road and bumpy road.
Yeah.
Right. I was on a plane from Pittsburgh. On my way there, the pilot said we may experience some turbulence, and so when the attendants could not provide service, the people got upset. On the way back, the language was, this will be a turbulent flight. They're going to stay seated, the seatbelt light. So because of the expectation, there was less aggravation, right? And sometimes we just have to understand that grief is a part of the journey.
It's a part of the journey.
It's a part. And I think we always say, we brace ourselves by saying things like, in our community, it comes in threes. But the reality is, it happens every day, right? Every day. The obituary is filled every day. The reality is, you may not know who's in the obituary, but every day the obituary is filled.
Yeah.
Right? Every day there are unemployment listings because people have lost jobs.
Yeah.
Every day there's repo mans coming. They may not be coming to your house.
Yeah.
Right. So I think that by normalizing the fact that loss is just as much of an experience for us as life.
Yes. Yes. Right? From the moment you take your first breath,
from the moment
to your last breath, you will be encountering loss. Period. You lose your teeth. Why? So that new teeth can come in. Right? You
shed skin.
You shed skin. Right. All of these, and these are little things that we don't, but it is creation's reminder that things change. That change is happening, whether you choose to connect with all of creation in that way or not. Right. And I get it. I do. So here's the thing. I've been doing death, dying, grief, and bereavement work or thanatology for a long time. And so, yes, my lens is toward loss and grief. I get it, right? But I think there are ways that all of us can engage in some of the process in ways that allow us as individuals and community to sort of navigate in healthier ways. So, yeah.
Man. So my next question, the second piece of this, well, that was already my second one. So my third piece goes back to this not only this, continuing to live is not a betrayal to the one or situation that has changed, but you mentioned being culturally sensitive because the ways different cultures deal with grief is different.
Yes.
And I say that because there are certain grief curricula that were never designed to be cross-cultural, right?
Right.
And I didn't experience that until I asked a question about why was this translated in another language? And they said no, and they weren't planning on it, right?
Yeah.
Because it was always for one group. So I say that to say, what are some ways we can culturally respond
Yeah.
in the holiday season and any season to grief moments?
Yeah. Yeah. You know, one of the biggest ways and one of the best ways to respond to people is to listen, right? Because and I say listen and not form an assumption around what they want and or need, what their experience is, because we do that, right? We assume everybody needs to do these 5 things. And sort of culturally, it is, if I want to journey with you, if I want to be present for you, support you, think about this holiday season, maybe I might want to. Humility keeps us not well. Humility invites us to ask questions, right? Humility invites us to not think we know everything, right? And so some of this is, we actually have permission to ask people, I know you talk about your family's loss. Are there some ways that your family has has supported one another in the past? What are some of the things your family's done in the past, right? So now I'm asking you to think about, because what I recognize is you have the strength and capacity in you. You have knowledge, you have a sense of knowing in you. And I need to invite that into this process. So these culturally appropriate ways are, it's me recognizing that not everybody believes that death comes in threes. So even if I use that kind of statement, not using it as an absolute, right? So that's why I do a lot of wondering with people, right? Because guess what wondering does? Wondering invites them and me to co-create and to journey together. Instead of saying, this is what works. It is, have you tried? I wonder if, and I may share stories about, I've supported a couple families recently who've been impacted by gun violence. So I know you've been impacted by gun violence. I've named that as a thing. And I may have said, here are a couple things that they've said to me. And I don't know if any of those might be supportive of you. Does any of that sound? So it is a willingness to ask, to lean in, to recognize that even if you are the expert, you ain't the expert. Like that is for me, the culturally appropriate way. Now let's talk about some things that maybe we're familiar with that our families do, right? So storytelling in families. So one of the things we would do, we tell stories. My family, and we're not as big as we were when the matriarchs, when the grandmothers were here, right? But we would tell stories. There is not a big holiday that comes when all of us are not together and are not telling stories of those that were here before. Because that storytelling is healing, right? Storytelling reminds us why we're connected, and it might also give us something to strengthen us for our future. So that storytelling is a great way, sort of culturally, to inviting people to tell you their stories, right? Stories about their loved one is a great way to be culturally appropriate, because you've just wondered and you've invited them to do the thing, right? And some basic things, making a dish. So if you're having a Thanksgiving dinner, right? What was grandma's favorite dish? What did she make? She made sweet potato pie. okay, who gonna make the sweet potato pie this year? Because we know grandma's not here. So it's maybe sometimes it is doing or making their favorite things. That's a way that we can come together. So inviting people to do what is their strength and recognizing that your strength and your family, it might be different than their strength and their family. Even if there are some similarities, I have to enter into every space with you in mind. Because if not, then I might run the risk of attempting to get you to follow a prescription for moving through your grief. And I don't believe that we can move through our grief with those prescriptions.
Woo.
Oh, I love it, Terrence. Listen, don't say. So some things we don't say. And this wasn't a question, but yeah, there are some things that we don't say. Now, let me say this. I recognize that there are some platitudes that we use that we think are helpful and we may have found helpful. But yes, so that one, saying they are in a better place. The truth is we may actually believe the person's in a better place, but in this moment, telling me that they're in a better place, it feels like often that you are trying to overshadow my pain. And you're saying, you don't have to cry. You don't have to feel sad. They're in a better place. We have to figure out a way how to let both of those exist. And by doing that, we might not say things like they're in a better place now. We might just acknowledge how much the person loved their loved one and let them sit with them in the sadness. So yeah, Terrence, I see that. And I don't know, this is Basine. I'm not sure how to pronounce it, but yes, don't say what I need to be or should be during my grief. And so Basine, here, I'm not cussing. I want you to hear what I say. I tell people to stop shooting on me. Don't should on me. Don't should on yourself, right? Because again, then you're trying to give me a prescription for how I must navigate. And here are some things you don't know. You don't know my relationship with that person. You don't know my you don't know the depth of loss and trauma I've experienced. And so you don't know if I've created some coping mechanisms that allow me to move through. You don't know what kind of support I have. Like, so you don't know these things. So to make a blanket statement about how someone should move discounts that there is some things working in the background that you may not have information about. So no prescriptions, only accompaniment.
Yeah, man. And I think part of that, and you said it, but you didn't say it directly, but this is what I got from it when you talked about prescriptions, because prescriptions simply mean that I'm trying to tell you what worked for me. But the reality is you aren't me, right? And it may not really have worked for me. It's what was told to me. And so I'm regurgitating what was told, but I haven't tested it. And it may not work for you, which is the last piece, because family gatherings are full of people with different relationships to the loss. Mm-hmm. And each of those different people may react differently. You talked about who's gonna, you mentioned who's gonna make the sweet potato pie or the yams. But there may be some people in the family that says, don't nobody bet not try, because that was Big Mama's dish.
Yep.
Right? Yep. Don't nobody bet not sit in daddy's spot
at that table. Right?
Because that's where daddy sits. And if anybody is added to the table, they need to pull up a chair to sit somewhere else because they're not going to sit in that seat.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Yeah. And Bay, you're right. There's no rule book for feeling sad or hurt from loss. Yeah. But I think that part of us, we have, that's where the grace comes in. The grace comes in journeying through the grief with someone. Yeah. Right? Not forcing them to go your way or you go their way, but co-experiencing the grief. Yeah. Together. Right? Yeah. Brene Brown says sitting with them, mm-hmm. Getting in that place with them. Yeah. And you said something that's so important, that the family dynamics, and family as in, you know, your actual family, but also sort of community dynamics, right? Each of us is moving through this differently. And we all have this, we have this thing working in the background, right?
this coding is in the background, right? And I want to make the dishes that grandma made, right? I want to make them because she gave me the recipes, and she would want them to be on the dinner table, right? But you don't want to make the dishes that grandma made. Well, guess what though? I also didn't want to go back to my grandmother's house, and I didn't go for 17 years, even though the house is in the family. That meant the family member who lived in that house could only see me if they came out the house and to somebody else's house. But you would go every week. So it is, each of us is going to do this a bit differently. You talked about grace. It is recognizing that in community, we have to be willing to allow, it's like it's rubbing up against each other, really is what's happening, right? And making space for your authentic move through grief and my authentic move through grief, and recognizing that in some ways, some of the things we need to move through might be in direct opposition, right? And so that's why family conversations, that's why having even doulas or therapists, chaplains join families and opening space just to sort of talk through some things, because as that facilitator, right? Therapist, doula, chaplain, someone with this, as that facilitator, you're able to say, can we pause for a moment? I want to name something. I hope you all listened and heard this. I want you to take note. Jamie said she wants all the dishes that grandma made. Napoleon said he don't want a single dish that grandma. Do you all see how different that is? But guess what? Since we're family, we have to figure out what we're gonna do. Napoleon, are there a couple of dishes that we can make? Can we agree on these two dishes? Can we agree maybe we make them together, and not maybe Jamie doesn't just go home and make all the dishes and think she's bringing grandma? Like, can we have these kinds of conversations? But we only do that. One, I'm not saying everybody's going to do that, but if we don't talk about grief, if we don't have our understanding within our family and our community, then we might do more damage when I bring five of grandma's dishes, and you wasn't looking to see those things on the table. And now I've caused some hurt in you that we need to talk about. And then we know you might not say nothing. So it can be a ripple effect. So yes, the dynamics in families are really important, and finding ways to make conversations like this common, or at least natural or normal, can help us move through this together.
Because one thing you said that is so important, that even in bringing in the doula, the chaplain, the counselor, the therapist, on the day of, right? You can plan as much as you want,
right?
But there are some things that may awaken, may activate, that you had no idea about, right? And so the conversations are necessary to allow for people to be open to the idea, to get into the practice of having the conversations, of facing the potential challenges. Because the other piece is, in ignoring it, you don't prep at all, and then everything activates at once, and it could potentially be overwhelming to an experience.
Yeah, definitely. And we've done these trainings, and just one person who can go into a home, right, as part of the family, and say, and can maybe make a statement about emotions. I don't know about you all, but I was nervous about coming here today because grandma was here last year, and a part of me still doesn't want to be here. But I'm like, being able to do those kinds of things also open up space for others for it to be normalized, right? Because that's the thing. So many of us have had to swallow how we feel for so long that we don't know what will happen when we actually allow ourselves to feel. And so somebody who can invite us, right, can make safe for us a space to feel, even at the family dinner, can be a healing part of navigating grief during the holidays. Because again, there's no one way. There are some things that we can do as families, lighting candles, praying, telling stories, having certain rituals, making dishes of the person, their favorite dishes or the things that they made. We can do those kinds of things. But the emotional stuff can still come up and can still feel overwhelming. And what I would say to a family is the emotional stuff coming up, right? Don't feel shame that it's coming up. It probably needs to. And then being able to look at each other with eyes that recognize you are navigating something heavy and I'm still here with you, right? Can be helpful.
Yeah. As we kind of round this out,
Yeah.
I wanted to give space if anyone had questions, but I love what Basine said, and it's a very it's sad and mature at the same time. It's mature in the fact that she's understanding that everyone's not understanding what she's going through or trying to understand.
Yeah.
But that's the sad part, right? That's also it's mature on her part to be able to understand that to keep her peace, she has to pull away. But it's also sad that the people that everyone does not recognize, not that they will understand it fully, but that they don't recognize the weight of what she's going through and the newness. And part of that is that conversation, I believe. How would you suggest um, that she maneuver, or what would you suggest the practice be that she engages in
Yeah.
to express what she's feeling, but also to be able to not be frustrated by others' seeming lack of compassion or empathy?
Yeah. That's a good question. So, not everyone has the capacity where they are to hold where you are, period. And I don't even know if that's sad, to be quite honest, because I think each of us is awakening in new ways every day. So we're growing. So, and I'm not saying that the person who is grieving now has to manage the growth of everyone else. I'm not saying that. I am just saying that I recognize that not everyone has the capacity to hold me in the way that maybe I feel I need to be held. Period. So it's my acknowledgement of that then guides how I interact with the world around me. So I love that Basine said, I'm learning that silence is golden to keep my mind at peace, right? And to just walk away. And so walking away is not a bad thing. It is. I need to know if this is the year that maybe I don't go to the family dinner because of how I am already feeling, and I'm at anticipate how that might rub up against those who will be present. I might look at the list and be like, who coming this year? Okay, I can't come this year. That's self-care. That's self-nurture, right? It's knowing that, okay, dinner is being served at 4. I don't know what time y'all family serve dinner, right? But say if you say dinner is being served at 4, but you know that folks ain't really, they say that and then dinner ain't really served until 6. It's making a decision. I do want to see my family. I do want to go by a hug and say hello to folks. So they said dinner served at 4. I know that means we really gonna be eating around 5:36. So I'm gonna show up at 5:15. And I'm leaving at 7:15. That gives me enough time to say hello, to eat a little bit, to laugh maybe, and then to make my I have to manage how I'm going to show up in this space. Because what I can't control is whether or not everybody around me is going to have the capacity to hold me. I don't know that you can hold me. I know when you told me that they was in a better place, that showed me that you probably can't hold me right now. Right. So it's knowing that, yes, this holiday season, I get to choose to engage family, friends, community. I get to choose. And then I tell people this. Guess what that also means? That also means that there are some people in our community who grief has been heavy for them. And I say community as in perhaps family, friend circle, right? You get to define what that means. Grief has been heavy for them and they have started to disappear. So yes, we get to decide how we want to engage. And part of being community means I also look around and I say, Dr. Napoleon ain't been here for a while. Maybe I wonder what it might be for me to check in with Dr. Napoleon. Maybe he won't come to dinner, but can I check in with Dr. Napoleon? So both of those take place, right? I get to choose to be alone. Yes, I hear you, I see you, and that right. You have that choice to be able to sit home with the memories. I'm gonna tell you, there was a holiday that I made my own little dinner, and I didn't go anywhere. I stayed home. I enjoyed my dinner. I was sad. I was a little lonely, but still I needed to do that for me. So I hear you choosing to be alone with your memories, right? And part of being in community means if you and I are in community, I'm not going to tell you you can't be home with your memories, but I might send a text that just says, thinking of you today. I might send a text that says, can I drop a plate by for you? We got plenty of dessert. Would you like me to bring something by? Right. So what does it look like to allow people space to breathe and to be in their grief and to not leave them also? Right. And because that's the other piece of this is sometimes folks are grieving in our spaces and we just let them sort of fall away and never go back and check to see. I know I haven't been engaged, but I may have needed somebody to come and just check in and tell me, come on and live, baby. Right. So both of those. But if you are going home, if you have to make a decision, you don't have to spend it with everybody. You can choose to be alone. You can choose to have your own rituals. You can, and you can choose to be in community and set boundaries. You can choose to say, I'm only going to say this once. Please don't ask me about A. You can choose how to engage in the communities if you are going to spend time with people. And you can decide at any moment, all right, I've had enough and I'm going home.
Man, this has been an awesome conversation, and I think it's so needed. Yeah, Terrence, it is sometimes hard to do with family, but it's necessary, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes it is necessary.
Hard and necessary. Yes, Terrence.
Hard and necessary at the same time.
Yeah. But we can do hard things. Sometimes the hard thing is the thing that must be done if we're going to move to whether you say next level, next, wherever I am. Sometimes I got to do the hard thing so that my healing, I can experience a new level of healing. I might have to do the hard thing of saying, I can't be with y'all this year. But when you see me again, I might be better, right? But that doesn't take away from it's a hard thing, right? We might have to cry while we do it, but we can still do it.
So, in any final words, you've said so much, you've explained so much. I just kind of want to review just a couple of things you talked about. You talked about masked grief.
Yeah.
When we try to cover it up, how it manifests oftentimes in physical ways that can be traced to a medical event, but it comes out.
Yeah.
You talked about grief being our natural response to changes, losses, and transitions to include death.
Right.
So grief is not only a death result.
Right.
Grief is a natural response. It's our human
Our human
response,
response. Yep.
right? It's a human experience that you don't have to try to get over or be cured from,
Right.
because it's not a sickness.
You're not sick.
You're not sick.
Yeah. You're human.
You're human.
Right.
Right?
The
And it's
system will
okay to
tell
be
you that you're
human.
sick and you need to show up a certain way, but you're not sick.
You're human.
Yeah, you're human.
You're human. And this was the major, right? The grief is the creator's invitation to us
Mm-hmm.
to continuously reimagine, redefine, reshape, and reorient ourselves so that we can discover our place and life, or in life and life
Yeah.
today,
Yeah.
right? The fact that we've lived beyond that loss.
Right.
So we have to figure out how we exist
Yeah.
today. And your continuing to live is not betrayal
Mm-hmm.
to the one or the situation that has changed.
Yeah.
Right?
Listen, I don't even know that I have that's it. It is critical for us to see ourselves as human, and there is no one way to move through life for the millions of humans that are on this earth, right? Each of us has a unique way that we are going to experience loss. Yes, there might be some similarities. Of course, there are, right? And um, we also need to make space for this as a natural way to continue to become. Like that's what this is. It's the loss does not have to take you out, right? The loss does not have to take you out. Sometimes you got to say that to yourself. The loss does not take the loss. This loss will not take me out. This loss will not. Sometimes you got to say that to yourself, right? Or this is when community helps. Sometimes community has to come and accompany you and remind you that the loss is not going to take you out. So yeah, but you said the things that I think are most important, and we are at Thoughtful Transitions right now. Dr. Napoleon, is we have our year-long remembering cohort, which is specifically for women who are navigating all kinds of losses, right? So if they go to thoughtfultransitions.org, you will see this invitation to a remembering cohort. It meets once a month for a year. Then there's a quarterly version that meets once a month for the quarter. So two different groups. And really it is helping people move through loss, explore identity, to be intentional about really engaging, being reorienting and reshaped and reimagined. It is an invitation to do that in community, helps people build rituals and practices that support them and others through their loss. And so if you go to thoughtfultransitions.org, you can learn about that and other things that we do to help expand our grief awareness in the world and our capacity for supporting one another through loss. And so we'd love for you to come out to one of our programs, whether it's virtual or in person. We do a lot of teaching, but we also do a lot of being with, so that we can remind each other that there is something on the other side of the loss that we've experienced. So it's been great talking with you tonight.
Always great talking to you. Um, I really believe that the watching of this video and the rewatching of this video will give space for people to be free
Yeah.
from the expectation of being a certain way or dealing an expected way, right?
Yes.
They said it, your grief is your fingerprint, which means there's no two alike. Your grief is not like anybody else's grief, and you should have permission to grieve, grace
Yeah.
to grieve. And that means protecting yourself as you grieve.
Yes. Yeah. That's it. That's it.
Listen, for everyone watching, we pray that after this is over, you share it with someone. It will be available on all the platforms, LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube. Take this, share this link, watch it again. We really pray from our faith tradition that you're able to navigate the nuances of this holiday season.
Yeah.
Thank you again, Dr. Jamie.
Thank you.
Thank you all for watching. You have an amazing evening.